Hey, welcome to this terrific Tuesday edition of Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV. I'm John Tobacco. Not only is today a terrific Tuesday, but there's so much going on in Washington right now with whether Trump's going to get impeached. There's an inquiry, there's an inquest, there's an impeachment. Every other day there's a new way they're trying to get the president. And you know, some odd about 20 years ago, almost to the day, we had one single Republican congressman here from the New York delegation who voted for impeachment when Bill Clinton was going through the same stuff. And joining me today in the Question Tequila studios for this terrific Tuesday and a Table Talk Tuesday, former Congressman Vito Fossella. 6 terms you did down in Washington representing the great people of Staten Island and Brooklyn. And if anybody knows what's happening behind closed doors down there, Vito, it's got to be you. What's happening?
Well, it's good to be with you, John. Yeah, I mean, it's not a very comfortable situation for the country. It wasn't 21 years ago when impeachment last took place of a president. It's a very difficult time. It's a situation that seems to tear the country apart, and rightfully so. Impeachment in and of itself is probably other than voting to send troops into harm's way, it's really among the most significant things a member of Congress can vote for. That is to undo an election. I have my views as to how we got to this point. Candidly, it seems as though, and I think I'm not alone in this, that since the day Donald Trump was elected, there appears to be an effort to undo that election. And one could argue that it's not just an effort to impeach the president, it's really to impeach the supporters of the president who chose Donald Trump in November 2016. And a couple of differences that exist today that didn't happen back in October of 1998 was there was actually a formal vote, right, to proceed with the articles of impeachment. There doesn't appear to be that on the horizon here. So members had to stand up and be counted in the House to proceed with impeachment. Secondly,
I want to just stop you there. I want to ask you about that because people are already, our loyal viewers are messaging me, people coming up to me on the street and they're asking me, whoa, no, they're actually starting the impeachment. Is Trump going to make it? And what they've done so far is send the signals through the media that there's an official impeachment underway. Right. But in fact, Vito, there's nothing official yet. There's been no vote to actually start an official impeachment.
Yeah, there has not been a vote, and that's the other thing. There are really no set rules when it comes to impeachment. People think it's maybe a normal criminal trial, when in fact it's a political statement, right? So it's almost, they create the rules as it goes along. If you saw recently, Senator McConnell said, listen, in terms of if the House moves on impeachment, we have to take it up given the rules of the Senate. So it really becomes a political back and forth. And I started saying earlier that, and even under former President Clinton's impeachment, as tough as that situation was, it was after a 4-year investigation of the independent counsel statute, which parenthetically, independent counsel statute went back to 1978 when President Carter signed it into law to go after people. And frankly, it led to the debacle of just unfettered, almost unbridled prosecution. And when that vote came up for renewal, it died, fortunately, because I was never a fan of that. But now, a lot of folks think that impeachment means the president is removed from office. That's not the case. It becomes a political question. Who knows where the House is going to go with this? And if they do vote to impeach, which it could be, then the Senate will take it up. And my guess is that unless something dramatic changes on a whistleblower issue, that who knows if it's true or not, we can't rush to judgment. I think that's foolish to rush to judgment in any case, especially when it comes to impeachment. But I think when you rush to judgment like this, you sort of undo any legitimacy to the process when people are already prejudging it and saying he should be impeached without even seeing any evidence. That to me is the biggest issue.
Let me ask you about that, because no one can know this stuff better than this guy, former Congressman Vito Fossella, because he was in the back rooms when all this stuff was going on, and it was the Republicans who were bringing in action to try to impeach Bill Clinton. Many of the Democrats that you were serving with at the time are still in place now.
Correct.
And how were people like Gerald Nadler and Nancy Pelosi, what were they saying against impeachment then?
I think the narrative, the common narrative on the other side, and as again, I'm very sympathetic to that because it's not an ideal position. When you run for office, you don't run for office to impeach a president or anybody. You run to serve the public and to do well and to improve the lives of your constituency and basically make things better for the country. So nobody goes into it, I don't think, with the effort to impeach. But for the most part, you think common narrative where we can't disrupt, this is meaningless, this is a tawdry thing, let's move on, the people have chosen. And now you're sort of seeing the exact opposite rhetorically of what you hear. We got to get this guy. This is unbelievable what's happening, and this can't stand. If you mean that much to, don't forget President Clinton was reelected, right? It's arguable that you can say just take it to the American people, and about a year from now, the people will go to the polls. If they think what the president has done is so egregious and so severe, then
we're looking at an election for president again in 2020, which is just a year and change away from now. How long were you guys going through this whole impeachment inquiry?
For the time it started, I think it was around October 8th, thereabouts, on 1998 until December of that year. So a couple of months of hearings. As I mentioned at the outset, it was after 4 years of very in-depth prosecution effort to find other things on the president. Again, right or wrong on what you think that was okay. But even it was only after I reviewed all the evidence, went through all the transcripts, you had to go to a certain room to see files that were sort of
And ultimately, it resulted in his reelection. Bill Clinton had a fine presidency after that.
In fact, politically, since it happened in October of '98, the Republicans in the House actually lost.
Viewers out there know that Frank Morano's my co-host. You're filling in, so you have some big shoes to fill there. But
totally.
They also
I don't know if I want to actually be in Frank's shoes, but
no, exactly.
Figuratively speaking.
Figuratively, yeah. But no, they also know that Staten Island is one of the most Italian-American congressional districts in the country, and they also know that in the Republican primary, 82% of Staten Islanders voted for Donald Trump. So Staten Island is this little oasis of Trump country in the middle of the bastion of progressiveness and liberalness here in New York. How hard is it to be in Congress and be representing a primarily Republican district when you're surrounded by everyone else who's completely opposed?
Well, first off, it was a great honor to be in Congress, to represent your hometown, and for me, every day was an honor to serve. It just so happened that we have a place in Staten Island and Brooklyn that just thinks a little differently about the role of government in life of whether it be New York City or the federal level. Don't forget that congressional district, which I believe is actually the highest concentration of Italian Americans, also has many more Democrats registered than Republicans. It just happens that many of the Democrats seem to be a little more moderate to conservative and more willing to vote for Republican. The rest of the city, that doesn't exist. But I think what is about Staten Island, John? You lived there a long time. You know what it's like. They believe in the rule of law. They believe in support law enforcement. They believe that when people work hard, they should keep more of the hard-earned money. They believe in, comes to education, higher standards, not just throwing money at the problem. You get up, believe in individual responsibility. You go to work. You're sympathetic to your neighbor. You, as a great example, you spend much of your volunteer time coaching young kids in sports. And that's what a community is all about. And that's what Staten Island, I think, has represented all these years. And you're right. They overwhelmingly, at least in the Republican primary, supported Trump because they wanted to change. And they saw a guy who was Again, whether you like the president or not, they saw in him a true leader that was going to disrupt and change and upend Washington, and you can't say he hasn't done that at all.
So, Vito, I'm always trying to work with our audience here and try to get something educational out of this stuff. But when you hear about impeachment and an impeachment inquiry has begun, the other side of the coin is Mitch McConnell said if they bring it to him in the Senate, he has to take it up. But you don't just need some majority, right? You need 66% you need a super majority.
You need 67 votes to remove. Yep.
67 votes. And for those of you watching at home right now, the Republicans have 52. The Democrats have 46 and 2 independents who caucus with them. But they would need 19 Republicans going into a presidential election to flip sides. So is it even feasible that the Senate would vote in favor of impeachment?
Based on what's out there now, no. The answer is a simple no. As I mentioned at the outset, we don't have an obligation to a party. We have an obligation to our Constitution. We take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and we put the country above party. At least I think that's what we should do always. So my issue is not so much whether or not this should proceed. It's, is there enough to proceed? And I just find it amazing that you have this anonymous, quote, whistleblower, and I've read the transcript, and you could sort of go in different directions with it, but already to say, based on that one transcript, that the President of the United States should be removed from office is crazy. I really do think it's crazy. It could come to that down the road with evidence, for example, back in the day, back in the last impeachment proceeding, the minority party actually had subpoena power. Now, to date, that has not occurred. In other words, give somebody due process, give of all people, the President of the United States, the opportunity to respond and refute this. But I'm saying we've already jumped over that and saying we should remove him from office, which I can't understand.
I can't understand it either, but we're going to understand a lot more throughout this 2 hours as former Congressman Vito Fossella joins us, filling in for Frank. We're going to talk about impeachment. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and talk about Table Talk, which was the original predecessor of Liquid Lunch. And before we go to this commercial, I just want to remind you that today kicks off the first day of Italian Heritage Month. And in celebration of that, Rose, can we get a shot of the table here? We have a beautiful Italian called antipasto with the mozzarella and mushrooms, olives, salami, pepperoni. Vito, have a bite. We're going to have a little snack. We're going to celebrate Italian Heritage Month, and we're going to have a wonderful liquid lunch. Quick break, coming back with some Table Talk Redux right after this.